So, to get us started today, I'm Jordan Stobie. I'm the executive director for Pandion Music Foundation. Anai is here as well. She's the program director, and we are really excited to have Mallorey Wallace joining us today, talking about grant writing, which is a big question that bounces around in our community. Often, that question is asked during our workshops. What are more opportunities for music creators to fund their music careers? So I'm really excited to have this workshop today for everybody and allow everyone to ask questions, and it's going to be great. So to start us off, for those who are new here watching the replay and are unfamiliar with Pandion, we're a 501(c)(3) nonprofit that provides community and skill building opportunities for music creators in Los Angeles and beyond to cultivate long-lasting lives in music. So we run these workshops every Wednesday, either at 11 a.m. or 3 p.m. Pacific time. So anyone who has access to Zoom is able to join around the world. And we have different themes and topics, different people involved in music or in the music industry or professionals in their field who have something to offer to musicians lead the sessions and provide education and community building opportunities for our music creators in our community. And Mallorey is a dynamic professional whose journey began with over a decade as a child actress and singer in film and theater. And today they channel that same passion and presence into their work as a grant writer and event planner with one mission to support vision-driven individuals and organizations in bringing their work to life through strategic, story-driven fundraising. So again, yes, welcome everybody. If you have questions throughout the session, go ahead and either pop them in the chat. You can raise your hand. Everybody's muted, so feel free to raise your hand and don't be shy. And we can also just hold questions till the end if you'd like to do that, Mallory. So it's totally up to you. Great, but yes, welcome. And Mallory, feel free to fill anything in that I forgot or missed.
Thank you, Jordan. No, it was a beautiful introduction. I'm so excited to be talking with you all today. I did prepare some slides, so I'll kind of share that with you and we can jump in from there. I think Anai and I discussed it earlier. You're welcome to put questions in the chat and then I'll get to them at the end,
Great.
if that works for everybody. Cool. Can y'all see my screen?
Yeah, perfect.
Fantastic. Well, then, hello, everybody, again. Thanks so much for logging in today. As Jordan said, my name is Mallorey Wallace. I'm super excited to be able to talk to you all today about grant writing for artists and creatives. And thank you again to Pandion and for all you do for artists and for connecting me with you all. So I'll start by sharing a little bit more about me. As Jordan said, I had a great introduction there. I have little to add. I do currently work as an event planner for the American Society for Quality here in Chicago, and I do have an on-air music-driven morning show with Radio Milwaukee. I'm like in the studio now. Sorry if there's a little bit of distraction from that. And then I do freelance grant writing on the side. So I have a certificate in advanced grant writing from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And then I also continue to do art professionally. And now I work alongside organizations and artists and individuals to help them secure funding to achieve their goals. So I figured I would start really small and then we'll kind of go out from there if that works for everybody. So what are grants, I guess, is the best place to start for this. So grants are financial awards, in this case, given to artists to complete a specific set of goals or to fulfill a specific set of requirements. There's many kinds of grants that you'll come across. I don't have an exhaustive list here by any means, but these are kind of some of the most common grants that you might find, especially as an artist. Project grants are pretty self-explanatory, so that's going to fund a specific project. Think like exhibitions, installations, or programs. Maybe you're looking to fund a small tour or a series of art shows or an album release. Something like that would fall under a project grant. There's also residencies, grant-funded residencies. I'm sure some of you are very aware of that. These are super common. Artists apply for funding to work or live in a specific space that's designated by the funder, right? It could be like a local museum or a hotel, maybe an artist cabin in another state or even another country. Not all residencies are grants, and not all grants are residencies. It's kind of like that square rectangle thing. But you usually find them listed kind of in the same space. The application processes tend to be really same, if not exactly the same. There's also fellowship grants. So usually this is something that supports an artist over more of an extended period of time. And they're often given out by foundations. So a group of funders or a body that gives away funds as opposed to an individual funder. They look really nice on a resume, but can be a little harder to come by. And then there's also emergency grants too. So these assist artists that are facing any kind of unexpected financial hardship. So I know we're all aware of the Los Angeles wildfires that happened or the pandemic. There were a lot of emergency grants coming out at that time, but there's also emergency grants that'll fund like really specific instances that you might be facing some financial hardships in. So keep your eyes out for those. Any of these grants, they might be more or less appropriate for you and your journey as an artist. It really just depends on your circumstances and your goals. And grants will really go from really hyper local. I've seen some grants that are like you have to live in like this 4 block radius, and then they'll go all the way up to international. Usually, not always, but typically, there's less money in those local grants, but there's also a smaller pool of applicants. And then as we go from regional to national to international, we'll find that that applicant pool grows, and then oftentimes the grant amount does grow with that as well. So sometimes it's better to start small, especially if you're a beginner. But that's kind of a rundown of kind of the typical grants that you're going to come across as a grant seeker. I do want to take a moment too to talk about kind of the current grants landscape that we're in. It's a really interesting time to be a grant writer or an applicant for a number of reasons. We're in right now a particularly unprecedented spot for many reasons. One constant is that things are constantly changing. So every week there's funding that's being pulled or moved around, especially at the federal level right now. There are some artist grants that are coming from the government that would be a federal grant. That's where we're seeing more of that volatility, right? But artists do often, I find the ones that I work with, get more money kind of from that foundation, individual funder side. But I do want you to all be aware of that. The volatility kind of has made for a more competitive grants market this year specifically. I don't mean to scare you. I hope this doesn't scare you at all into never applying for a grant. I think it's so important to have some context, though, as you are applying. And it's important to be realistic, right? So even when the grant space isn't volatile, as I'm sure if you've applied for grants before, you know it can be very competitive. So all of that to say, give yourself grace. Don't get discouraged. There's still thousands of artists across the world that are thriving off of grant funding. And hopefully you guys will be next. So let's say you're looking to apply for a grant. The first thing you're going to want to do is some preliminary research and prospecting. So before you start on any of this, and just as an artist in general, right, you're going to want to really interrogate who you are as an artist, and what are you seeking to accomplish with more funding? Why are you seeking funds, right? Just wanting money to kind of sustain your career isn't really a specific enough goal. So I would encourage you to identify your needs really specifically and then kind of build from there. So you might ask yourself, kind of what deal breakers do I have, right? Grants will often require kind of some level of compliance. It can be boundaries in what you can spend your funding on, or maybe it's a travel that's required from them. You're going to figure out what you want, why you want it, and who you are. That's your first step before anything else. Luckily, we're in a very digital age. Here we are on Zoom, right? The internet is really the most obvious starting point when it comes to this research and prospecting phase. There's many websites and databases specifically for artists seeking grants. I'm going to give you a whole like hyperlinked list of those later. But generally speaking, it would also be really valuable to just Google the name of whatever city you're in, plus like Artist Foundation or Artist Grants, right? You'd be surprised what you can find with just a Google search. There's also like Facebook groups for artists that are looking for grant funding that I found to be helpful in the past. It can be helpful to also follow foundations or funders on social media too, just to kind of keep up with their grant cycle. And there's a lot of newsletters as well. Again, I'll give you a list of some of those later on. Tapping into your network then is super, super important. This is usually where I see a lot of good things happening in the grant space, right? Maybe you're already involved with like a local arts nonprofit. You might be aware of a couple of local giving foundations, or maybe you know a venue that could connect you with potential funders. You really never know unless you ask. So talk to other artists too. See what they've applied for, see who's awarded them funds in the past, what their experience was like. That's very common in the grant space. And then from there, we build to kind of eligibility and alignment. Um, you probably could find a million grants for artists in an area or on a national scale, right? But it's not always going to be the right grant for you. It's very time consuming to apply for grants, so it's better to work smarter and not harder by applying to grants that really heavily align with you and your brand and your goals. If you're not sure if a specific grant's a good fit for you, you can always look again into who was previously awarded that grant that you were applying for. You can even reach out to that awardee. I find myself doing this all the time. You can ask them about their application process. It's very commonplace in the grant writing space to do things like that. And the worst people can say is no, right? Or really ask your funder. They really want a relationship with you. They want to get to know you and who they're funding. I'm going to harp on that throughout this. It's a really big component of this. Can also be helpful in the past. I've looked at kind of news releases, speeches, any materials that have been released by the funder to help you better identify their mission, their vision, and their goals to see if you're really in alignment with them and the funding that they have. Cool. So let's say that you've done your research, you found a grant you think you're really deeply in alignment with your artistry, with your financial goals, and now it's time to apply. So this is the step where a lot of people don't know where to start. It can feel a bit daunting, but we really just rely on what the funders are asking for of you in that grant application. That's really you're going to be your roadmap there. The applications are always going to look different, but they'll likely ask for a few key components. I'm sure a lot of you, if not all of you, are very familiar with an artist statement. If you're looking for more of like that government or federal funding, they might use different terminology like abstract or summary, sometimes bio. Sometimes they'll be like, just tell me about yourself, really. They're all looking for kind of the same thing here. You can think of it like a highly curated elevator pitch. Here you can really let your personality shine through. And you also want to be really mission oriented. Remember earlier when we were brainstorming all about who we are as an artist and what we want this funding for? This is where you get to talk about that, how you want funds for a really specific reason and why you're exactly the best person that should be awarded these funds to utilize them in the best way. You're going to want to sell yourself really authentically here. I see a lot of artist statements a lot of times that use really passive language too, like I hope my art does this. I want my art to do this. I'm always steering people away from that and into more of a confident, active voice, right? So we're turning I hope my art does this into my art does this through these means, and so on. Compliance is also huge for every part of applying for grant. So if there's a word count, follow it. To use spell check, don't use AI. Funders are going to take note of this, and they might reject you based on something as simple as word count, right? Moving on, statement of need. That phrase is usually more in the federal grant space as well, but there's usually always an equivalent in artist grants. Here, the funders really just asking, they want to know why you need these funds and what you're going to use them for. So overall, you really want to make a case that there's some kind of need in a certain community or in society at large that only you can remedy with the funds you're asking for. So, for example, let's say I am a drag queen in Seattle in the queer community, and I want to do 3 shows this summer in that community to support it, right? So I can package this. Let's say I go and find some statistics on the queer community in Seattle and how they don't have third spaces, or they feel like there's not a lot of places for them to convene. So I can then tend to take those statistics and package that by then saying, well, the funding that I'll use for these shows is going to kind of cover this problem that we already know is existing. So funders that way too can see the impact that you can make with your art and with the funding that they will, of course, give you because you're a wonderful applicant. So when you go about your statement of need in a way we're using stats like this, you can really show them some measurable means of impact. Again, sell yourself here. Stats can be helpful, but also rely on that anecdotal information too. A blend is really the best. There are also a lot of grants that may ask you how much money you want. I've seen people kind of fall into a pitfall here. I'd encourage you not to apply for the highest level of funding just because, right? If you can't break it down into a budget as to why you would need that much funding, again, it's just a pitfall I see a lot of people fall into. So be aware of that. Goals and objectives is super common. Just general goals and objectives. They might also be called like measurable outcomes. So this is really where the funder is just asking for more of a precise list of exactly what you want to accomplish with your funding, right? It's kind of like an abbreviated statement of need. They might also ask you for activities and timelines. So they might ask you to kind of break down that timeline or general list of activities that you would undergo if you're granted the funds. For this part of it, it's really important to be very organized and detailed and specific, right? This is where something like a Gantt chart could be super helpful. If you're unfamiliar, I can drop that in the chat. You can research that. There's a lot of ways to kind of display timelines in like a project management sense. But funders are usually also happy with like a list format as well. When it comes to artist grants, funders are pretty conscious. They understand that artists aren't grant writers, right? You guys are artists. But also just, think it through. You're gonna likely revise this part a couple of times to kind of see what does and doesn't make sense. I think a lot of people get a little more nervous at this part too, and I always encourage them, don't worry, right? Activities and timelines are informative, but they're usually not 100% indicative of exactly what you would do if awarded the funds. So you're usually able to work alongside a funder to kind of amend this at some point in the process. But still, try to be realistic, right? Budget is going to be a huge part of every grant application, of course. Again, organized and simple, but still specific. So this is probably going to be one of the more highly scrutinized parts of a grant application. And your budget should really just reflect the information that you've already conveyed in other parts of your application. But it's also going to include all of those expected and secured sources of funding, as well as their intended use. So let's say you're asking for $10,000 to do a Midwest tour. You're going to want to break down how much of that money is going to go towards personnel cost, lodging, transportation, contingencies as well. And then really be prepared that if you're granted this funding, that you could carry out all of your goals with the budget that you lay out. Sustainability is a term that funders throw out really often. They want to be sure that artists can not only, that if they're granted the funds, that not only they could carry out their project, but that they also have the resources outside of money, right? Time, network, personnel, things like that to do so as well. Usually they'll have a conclusion, some kind of like recap section at the end. Again, you can be more creative here in like a literary sense. You want to appeal to emotions and their logic equally. Summarize your application. You want to really maintain your alignment with your goals. And again, just sell yourself authentically, right? They might ask you for attachments too, especially for artists, they always will. They might ask you for an EPK, for work samples, a resume, a website, things like that. You never really know. But if you don't have any of those, it might be a good time to start on them if you're considering applying for grants. But again, they're really all different. So you might come across applications that ask for far less than I've laid out or much more. Again, if you're unsure, tap into your network, do some research, or ask your funders. Again, they really want to develop a relationship with you. They are so much more likely to award funds to an applicant that they trust, that they feel like they know, and that they believe in. So asking questions to them, it's not going to be seen as a sign of naivety, but more so as a sign of ambition and a willingness to comply as well. So funders really like to see that in general. Just a couple kind of general do's and don'ts. You're going to want like at least 3 different people to read over any kind of grant application for spelling, grammar, and content. The more eyes, the better. Grant application timelines too can be a little hairy, right? You're going to want to keep a really tight timeline, something that you look at daily. There might be application fees, right? They can They can vary. I think the highest I've seen for an artist grant can be anywhere up to like 200 on the really high end. Um, so that's something to be aware of as well. Also, most applicants are not awarded funding on their first go. I really encourage you to apply to the same grant multiple times, especially if you really feel like it's a good fit. And you can figure that out again by following up with that funder. Ask how you can improve your application year after year. They're going to really enjoy seeing that consistency and that ambition if they also think it's a good fit, right? And then save your applications. That's a huge one for me. You can upcycle for future grant applications. It gets way easier after the first one. So just save anything that you submit to them. It's a good rule of thumb. You might even find in your application process that your budget doesn't make sense, right? Or that the alignment maybe isn't as promising as you thought. That's okay. Take your work, find another grant that fits better, right? The application phase is usually where we kind of uncover these blind spots and we really narrow down our goals and get to know who we are better as an artist. Again, follow up, follow up, follow up again. It's huge. Obviously, don't clog anybody's inbox. Don't go overboard. But whether you're granted these funds or not, you're going to want to follow up. You can request a pre-application meeting. That can be helpful sometimes. The funder may even be able to connect you with funders or grants that are in better alignment with your goals, if their grant isn't really a great fit for you, right? So just keeping those doors always open is going to be really important. So congratulations. Let's say you've been awarded your very first grant. Yay. Now you have to follow through with the plan that you laid out in your application. And you have to comply with the guidelines that are set forth by your funder, achieve your dreams, all these great things, right? You can think of your grant kind of like a contract. It basically is. So you should be an expert on what your grant requirements are, and you should follow that path that you already laid out in order to fulfill those requirements. It is super helpful, if not necessary, to review their requirements frequently. Keep that timeline on your calendar, on your desk, whatever works for you, wherever you're going to see it. Your funder might review or audit your progress at any time. They really want to make sure that that money that they give you is being used adequately and how you said you would use it. So it's really important to keep a hold of any records and receipts. So let's say something goes wrong, you miss a deadline, something like that. It would be really, really helpful for you to have these documents, emails, anything that would help the funder paint a picture as to why you might not have been able to meet some kind of requirement, right? They do have the right to terminate awards and recover funds, so your compliance is really crucial to your own well-being as well. But generally speaking, your funders are your friends, right? They're literally one of your biggest supporters. They gave you a big chunk of money, right? And they want you to succeed. And it looks really good on their end when you do well too. So if you think you might need an extension, let's say something's not working the way you had anticipated, I always encourage people to contact your funders sooner rather than later, right? They can award you these extensions. They can maybe amend one of the grant requirements if you make a good case. And then follow through to the end of your grant. Do all the requirements, and then you guessed it, follow up again, right? They might fund you in the future. Maybe they can connect you with other funders. So it's a really important part of this. And we kind of touched on the importance of tapping into your network, of social media, of internet research. As I mentioned before, there's several databases and websites that are specific to grants and specific to grants for artists that you can really leverage for your own good and your journey into artist grants, right? There's a couple, these first two are more so examples of kind of these more local places that you can find grants. New York Foundation of the Arts is great. They're a wonderful free resource for finding current grants. They list grant opportunities alongside their eligibility requirements. So some of them are for New York residents, some are national, so you can all definitely click around there. They really get into the nitty gritty with these resources for grant seekers as well. I like their website. Definitely focus on it if you're based in New York or just to look for general grant seeker resources. They've got articles about writing your resume. They've just released like a really cool two-part article about applying for funding for documentaries. So they kind of really get very micro with it. They also offer workshops, consultations one-on-one, job opportunities, all of that jazz, and it's free. It doesn't get better than that. Artist Trust is pretty similar. This one's in Washington State. I'll have these shared out with you. What I have hyperlinked there is their list of national funders for individual artists by discipline. Again, they're based in Washington. They have some of those hyper local resources, but they also have really solid foundations for artists in any state. So I definitely encourage you to click through there and explore some of those funders that are listed on the website. They too have workshops. They're not so much focused on grants, but more so like general artistic topics, right? It's a free resource. Again, they do have an optional membership. But this is really an example. When I talked earlier about kind of putting in your state, like I lived in Wisconsin for a while, just Googling Wisconsin Artist Grant, Wisconsin Foundation, if you're looking for more of that hyper local aspect, that will definitely help you out. Colossal, one of my favorites. I love Colossal. This website is laid out really beautifully. It's more of a catch-all than the other two that I listed. They focus on news and culture, which you'll see on their homepage if you go there. But they do have a rolling list of grants under their opportunities tab. They do it kind of month by month, and then every month they list out, they've got grants. They do competitions as well, residencies, and then fellowships too that are available to artists. It's free of cost, and they've got a newsletter that is specific to that opportunities tab where they're going to give you all those grants, competitions, etc. And it's on a national scale too, which is really nice. Women Arts is big. I'm a fan of the resources that they offer. I will say that their website looks archaic and looks a little sketchy, but they're very much legit. Per their name, it is geared towards women, but they do list opportunities for all kinds of artists. They have a really solid list of emergency grants, a list of national funders, and then they've got some nice like one-pagers with tips and tricks for applying for funding. So that's definitely a solid resource for artists. And we're kind of getting like bigger as I talk about this. So now Candid. Candid is super commonly used in the grant space. I use it all the time. It's very detailed, it's very dense, and it's pretty exhaustive too. So if you choose to go that route, I'd encourage you to look into what they call Candid Learning. They offer free workshops that are really geared towards grant seeking in all of its forms. They are super reputable. They also offer a foundation directory where you can freely look up foundations to fund your goals, all for free. Super nice. The only drawback for you as an artist is that it's a huge pool. I mean, it's going to be anything from like government grants, medical, and beyond. You can filter it down, but it's a rather large body of information on Candid. And then even bigger from there, Grant Station is like Candid times 1,000. You will find a really large swath of grants here, many of which are not specifically meant for artists and creatives. Again, it's somewhat similar to Candid in that way. But this is kind of the most holistic way to look for grants all in one place. It does come with a rather hefty price tag. This one's not free. It's about $200 a year, but it's really easy. It's very quick once you have that, and the membership does come with other benefits as well. But then again, like we said earlier, your greatest resources are going to be local nonprofits, other artists, talk to your network, and then just that Google newsletters, social media. Keep your finger on the pulse of funders that you might know who've maybe funded artists that are similar to you, maybe artists that you look up to, things like that, right? It's a really great way to find funding. I must have talked really fast, and I really apologize. This went very quickly. But thanks so much. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for Pandion as well. I won't get into it too much, but I do think we really need the arts now more than ever with everything that's going on. I know the grants world is a bit volatile, as I said earlier. Applying for grants can be complicated and a little intimidating, but you're all smart and talented and ambitious candidates. So I wish you all the best of luck as you apply to grants. And please feel free to contact me on Instagram, on LinkedIn, or by email. And if you have any questions as well, I don't know if anything popped up in the chat on AE, but I'm happy to take any if there are.
Great. Thanks, Mallory. That was so informational and amazing that you're offering this for our community. Thank you again, because there's a lot of questions that go around about this. I still have questions about it, and so I do want to open up the floor in case anyone has questions they didn't put in the chat. And I thank you for dropping the links in there for all those resources. If anyone wants to click on those right now and take a quick look, or save them for later, that you can do. And I might just start off with a question for you that maybe will trigger some others. I think that I've heard this from many other musicians, and I've thought it myself as a musician. When there are so many applicants and it's competitive in these grant opportunities, and you don't have necessarily a specific niche that you can think of. Like, do you have any suggestions for artists who might be like, I don't know how I stand out. How am I different from all the others? How can I make my application really um, unique in that way? Do you have any suggestions for that when artists are looking to apply for grants?
Yeah, I think that's probably also like the number one, not complaint, but I guess difficulty that I hear artists having too is that it's just such a big pool of applicants. How do I stand out? I hear that a lot. I think you really just have to play to your strengths. Like, if you're a really, really good writer, definitely lean on that. I've seen people be able to like finagle some great grants out of just being like a really good storyteller, right? If that's your strength, play into that. You can add, the nice thing about artist grants too is that you can be a lot more creative in your application, right? I find myself in a federal grant space a lot, which is super rigid, like data driven. They want like really sterile language. Have a little fun with your application. Again, another really great way to stand out that I think is pretty underrated is trying to have that relationship with that funder. I mean, it's just huge. I think some people sometimes are like, they hear that and they're like, okay, I'm going to schedule a pre-application meeting. I'd encourage you to have a purpose if you're going to take time for a meeting. But like just kind of like that general like introduction, kind of similar to like if you're applying for a job, send them an email, right? Send them an email, ask if you're a good fit, introduce yourself. Um, but I mean, other than that, the bigger thing too, I've seen a lot of artists have success. I talked about it earlier, kind of finding stats and kind of like reverse engineering yourself towards that, right? So if you make music for like a certain community that maybe is like underrepresented in any kind of way, you can really package like a more of a data-driven story and like sandwich it into your artistry, into your application. I think grant writers find that really nice because then again, they can see that really clear ROI, right? And can really see the impact that their funds are making in the community. Thanks for asking,
Great.
Jordan.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Um, Anyone else have questions? Go ahead and raise your hand. If it's specific, that's fine too, because that's always seems to be something applicable to everyone. Um, give it a couple minutes and see if anything comes about. There was actually Ken, you had said something earlier, that one of the obstacles you've been facing is that you have to have 50% of your income coming from music. Was that a specific grant you were looking at, or maybe you could give a little more background on that if you'd want to?
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. I don't remember which one it was. I noticed on a few websites. I think there was also it was relating to getting some help, like mental health and things like that, that they wanted you to have 50% of your income coming from music, which I thought was kind of odd because they were offering support and things like that. And I didn't understand why you had to get 50%. I don't remember if it was for any grant in particular. It might have been one in particular. I just don't remember. I might have been confused on that. It might have
Mm.
been for support. I don't know if you know anything about that, Melanie.
Yeah, sometimes the thing about grants, especially when you have individual funders, they really get to decide how they want their money to be used, right? So they can have some really specific, um, I'll say, guardrails to how they want that used, that sometimes can feel really restrictive for artists. I have seen things like you're talking about of they want certain amount of income to come from that. They'll ask you for like application fees and things like that, which sometimes makes me crazy. I'm applying, I'm asking you for money. Why are you taking my money to begin with, right? So it can be a little frustrating. I'd go back to what I spoke about before, kind of with that alignment. It, I would encourage you to look for other opportunities. And then also, again, I'm such a broken record, reach out to that funder. Maybe they're willing to make some kind of adjustment. Maybe they didn't really communicate well what they meant on the application. Again, when you're dealing, especially with those individual funders and not foundations, people that are just looking to support an artist, then they really too do have a lot of freedom to kind of move those guardrails around more. And the better of a relationship you have with them, the more likely they are to then kind of work with you, especially if they really believe in you too, on getting your needs met, and then also creating community impact from there.
Great. Thanks, Ken. Yeah, that's great to know, Mallory, that I think I wouldn't have known that probably from a musician's standpoint, that you can reach out and, get feedback from the funders. So that's good to know. Great. We've got Chris. Wonderful. Chris has a question. Wants you to speak a little bit more about the importance of a compelling narrative and how to best align it with a budget, which is a good question.
Yeah, I love this question. Compelling narratives and best aligning it with a budget. It depends on how you want to start with your application, right? I think for me, I find it easier to kind of start with a budget and then build a story around there. Usually you're applying for a grant because there's a need, right? That need is going to be really spotlighted then in your budget. And then again, calling back to what I talked about earlier with like statistics and things like that. What is the need in the community? You obviously have your personal need, and then tying that into your budget. So I need this funding to help fill this gap, maybe in the industry or maybe in the specific city that I'm in, and these funds are going to help me do that. When it comes to like creative writing and things like that, if you have it, use it. Again, these funders that are funding musicians and artists, they're not expecting you to hire like grant writers and things like that. They're really understanding that you are independent artists. This is exactly what they're looking to fund, right? But be confident, get a great artist statement, have people look at it over and over again. If you know a good writer, maybe reach out and see if they'd be willing to help you and kind of beef it up and make it more compelling. But yeah, I mean, it's a little fluid. I don't know if that was the most specific answer, but that's what's on top of my mind.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah, it's hard when you don't have a specific grant you're looking at, or but it's nice. Yeah, that's really helpful on a general level to help people as they're starting to get into creating the narrative around it. Michelle, is it worth it to have someone worth it to have someone help them apply, and are there people for hire who help with that or work on commission from the grant received? That's a great question.
It is a great question. Um, it's up to you. It's up to what kind of finances you might have. It's up to how big the grant is. Um, it really depends. I think it's smarter to spend money on a grant that maybe you've already got that relationship with that funder. Maybe you've applied a couple times and they've let you know, like, hey, I got a good feeling about this, something like that. Maybe look into spending money on it. It's hard to say because, right, we're asking for grants because we don't have the funding that we need to do these things. So trying to hire someone, I've seen it go really well and I've seen it not go very well. it's really up to your personal discretion and the kind of financial situation that you're in. I think where it's easy to have kind of that help there is to just get more eyes on your application. Ask your fellow artists who've applied for grants. Maybe one of them that's been awarded a grant from that same foundation. Again, they'll usually almost always they'll list their previous awardees or grantees on their website. Try and reach out to them, right? See if they can look over your application. They obviously did something well with it before. The funder really liked them and gave them those funds. Usually people are kind, sometimes they're not. That's life, right? The worst they can say is no. There are people that do this kind of like freelance grant writing work. If you go on LinkedIn and look up freelance grant writing, you can find it. You can also work alongside like artists, nonprofits that have grant writers, things like that. Sometimes they might just have kind of one-off resources too. And then some of the resources that you will also receive for attending here today will hopefully kind of help you to work on your grant application without necessarily having to spend the money. Maybe you get lucky, find someone that does it pro bono. I don't know. Um, yeah,
Have
that's
you
what I'll say.
have you known anyone to work on commission for that kind of thing? Or have you seen that before? You? Nice.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do sometimes. There's some of us out there for sure. It's hard to find them because we're not all in like one room or on one website to find kind of freelance grant writers like I do. Again, I would reach out to like nonprofits in your area, see if there's like a grant writer on staff and see if they'd be willing to work with you. It might even be useful to go talk to like a local university that has a grant writing program. See if they've got alumni, see if they've got like professors that might even be willing to work with you or just point you in the right direction too, right? I think that's a can be a very local question, really specific to where you are. So that might be a really good place to start. There's some like there are some like online bodies that give out certification for grant writing. But I don't really think that that might be worth looking into to reach out to them. I've never tried it, but that's my thoughts on that one.
That's a great idea, looking at universities. Great. Thanks, Michelle. That was a great question. And then Chris had one follow-up question about feedback from funders. You had mentioned that at the beginning. If you don't receive a grant, what's your suggestion on like how to ask for that feedback or what you could do in that way?
Please ask for that feedback. Usually when I see people win grants, it's not their first application. I would say it's kind of rare that I would see, especially artists, get that funding the first time around. Please reapply. If you don't use the same application though. You're going to want to tweak it. You're going to want to ask them in your follow-up, what can I do to improve it, right? And then use what they say as your roadmap in your application for the next year. Uh, if you do not receive that grant, please reach out to them. Reach out to them before, reach out to them after. Don't be a pest, right? But again, I mean, that relationship is just so important. I think sometimes it can feel, what's the right word? A little like nepotism-y in that space because you often see that these artists already have relationships with these grant writers. And you think, how do they know them? Maybe it's because they keep applying and they reach out to these funders and they email them and get to know them. And then they start building that trust, that familiarity with one another. Now they're looking for your application, right? They're excited to receive it, and hopefully you'll get awarded those funds. So yeah, definitely reach out, be polite and businessy, classic business email. But again, they know you're artists. That's why they're funding you. That's why they're like looking to talk to you. So they're pretty used to working with creatives. So always follow up.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Chris, for the questions. Any more last minute questions before we start wrapping up?
I do see one here that says that will people help on commission? With grant writers that do freelance like I do, I usually see it's like there's not necessarily like a standard way that people will ask to be paid out. Sometimes it's like an hourly thing for the amount of hours they put. And then there can be like a component on top of that of like, and then we'll get this percentage of if you win the grant. The only thing I would say with that is you have to be wary of like the budget component of your grant if you plan on like using any funding to kind of make that up. Sometimes grant writers don't necessarily like to see that, so it might be a better idea to not necessarily put that into the budget, but to just have that as like a personal financial decision, if that makes sense, right? But yes, people do help on commission. They help in a lot of ways. I would encourage you, if you're gonna work with like a grant writer, to have that financial conversation sooner rather than later, so you don't get bit in the butt on your way out, right? Some of them will only work on like if you get awarded it, usually like the younger, more green in the industry, and there's pros and cons to working with people that are newer, right? But yeah, talk to universities too. Like when I was getting my grant certification, I was so hungry to work with anyone for free. I'm like, I'll put in any hours, right? So you know, that might be a really solid place to start if you're looking for someone to help you out like that.
That's a great idea. Amazing. Thank you so much, Mallory. Unless anyone's welcome to pop in with a last question. Oh, Anai, does it harm your chances of being funded if you submit your application right before the grant deadline? That's a great question. Does it benefit you to submit sooner rather than later?
I love this question so much. Timelines are huge with grants. Again, it's a sign of that you're going to comply with the funding, with the budget. You're going to make your funder look good, right? If you can't meet word counts, if you can't meet deadlines, you're pretty seriously hurting your chances of receiving this funding. But if you submit your application like the day after, it doesn't always taste the best in that funder's mouth, right? Did they rush through it? Are they using AI? Are they really just reusing old applications, right? I don't think it looks bad to submit it right before a deadline. I think it shows that you have worked really hard on this application. I hear it from funders. I don't ever hear funders complain about receiving it like right before a deadline. I mean, it's there for a reason, right? I hear a lot of complaints about them receiving things after a deadline. And then I do often hear chatter too about if they receive it like too quick, there can be like kind of a weird feeling of a suspicion of, you know, why was this so quick? Because again, grant applying for grants is a pretty timely process, right? So they're going to want to see that you're being thoughtful about it, but that you can still keep on with that timeline, right? There's a balance there to be found.
Great.
What do I think about
Um,
building a grant toolkit? Sorry.
yeah.
I guess I'll take it. Let's go. What do you think about building a grant toolkit that can be repurposed for multiple applications? Great idea. I love that. I love that a lot. Again, I think that's kind of the what I was talking about earlier with being able to upcycle your grant applications and saving them always. It's going to help you so much. For me, like when I work with an organization or an individual that's never applied to a grant, we got a lot of ground to cover, as opposed to if you've applied to even one grant before, right? You've already thought through why you need the funding, things like that. You've got your artist statement. You've got maybe any of those attachments they'll be asking for, work samples, things like that. So I think it's a great idea. Again, just be careful about like using the exact same application. You're always going to want to read through it and make sure that you're not putting anything in there that is in alignment with the previous grant that you applied for. So keep a close eye, but yeah, always keep it, always upcycle. Don't make your life harder than it has to be.
Great. Michelle, I've been on the jury for people applying for grants but never applied to one. So much work, yes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's an interesting space. It can be pretty tiring, but so is being an artist at times. I've been in that space as well, but we're all smart, hardworking people. So yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think I mean, I've heard great stories, of people getting grants and how much it's helped and made it possible to do certain projects. And I think it seems like it's definitely worth it. I mean, obviously depending on your finance situation, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, $25,000 grant that you were
Oh,
involved with, Michelle. Yeah,
Yeah,
some of
once
them
you get
are.
into the federal space, it can
Yeah.
$1 million grant, things like that. That's very nerve-wracking, but
Yeah,
yeah.
great.
But I really appreciate you all. I really
Yeah.
appreciate the things too. Thank you all so much for engaging with me.
Thank you so much. It was so great to get this information out there, and we'll have the replay up on our website for anyone who wants to go back and take more notes or refresh or share with anyone else. And please invite you to share about our workshops with your friends and family and communities, and invite people to our upcoming workshops. We've got next week a community listening session, which we haven't done in a little while, so we hope that people will join us. Looks like we've got one question, and I'll speak about the community listening session in a second, more about that. If you want to come on this and ask a question or comment.
Okay, of course, the second you call on me, I forget what my
Oh,
question is. But let's see. It was, oh my gosh, what was it? Sorry, I've had a traumatic brain injury. So
oh, no worries.
I guess it,
Oh yeah,
uh,
I can give you more
I
time
don't
to
know.
when you
I'll
get it.
try to remember. What were you just saying before?
Um, oh God, I'm gonna have to struggle with this too. I was talking about the community listening session. We were the last question I think we just went over was, or we were talking about the amount of grants being offered, federal grants being really high level, $25,000 grant that
Oh,
some,
that's high. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that was my question. If I've never ever, now you helped me. So I realized my oh my gosh, I'm getting a call. Sorry. So let me get.
Oh, no worries. Let's come back to that maybe if I can. Oh, did she leave? She might have
Yeah,
left.
I think they dropped out, maybe with the
Yeah,
call.
okay. Shoot. Well, hopefully we are gonna have the AMA, correct?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So if anyone has any other questions that pop up, feel free to hop over to our Facebook. We've got a private Facebook group there you can join called the Creators Circle. And you can ask questions on the thread that we'll have till the end of the week for Mallory if there's any questions that come up later this week. It looks like she's actually back, so maybe let me see if she's I'll unmute her real quick.
Okay, sorry. I pressed the wrong red button.
Oh,
Okay.
no worries.
Okay, so my question was, it was about the amount. Oh yes, so it was, I honestly, I'm just starting to gather a budget together, but I am. Oh, this is my question, Mallory. You both of you, please give me your input. So I'm a singer songwriter. I'm also a visual artist, and I'm also a children's book author. And I had this traumatic brain injury that nearly killed me, and now I like, so I want to work and make on my second sophomore album. In 2012, I made my first album, and then 6 months later was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I've basically been like fighting for my life for the past like 15 years. So now I want to make a second album now that I cured myself from this near death experience. And so I have managed to publish 4 books after getting out of the hospital, and they haven't made more than $23. Like I haven't made any money. I'm not on my feet financially, and so I'm listening to, like, I heard a few of what Mallory's saying is to go for the small grants first, but like basically I'm living in California right now. I would like, my intention and dream and my technicolor dream is to write and get a grant to help me go live and record my second album in New York City in the East Coast. So, and I used to be a member. I went to Cal Arts. I used to be a member of, so I'm a totally multidisciplinary artist. And I feel like these times are actually super creative. Like I don't have any bank account at the moment to fund all my creativity, but I've got 1,000,001 ideas.
Yeah. I mean, talk about a compelling story, first of all. It's incredible what you've been through and overcome. Um, and that would definitely be a story I could see if someone interested in funding after that. I am in awe of your resilience. That's incredible. Um, for you, it definitely, I would look at like emergency grants. Starting small can be good, but it's not for everybody. If you want to go big, go big.
Yeah, I
More
want to go
power to
big at
you.
this point. Exactly. I feel like fuck it. We only have one life to live. I almost died twice. I'm like ready to go. I started a podcast. It's called Carpe Diem. I have problems with admin and digital stuff after the permanent brain damage I have now. But I haven't figured out how to get my podcast on Apple Podcasts, but it's on the platform called Libsyn, and I wrote a book that's daily affirmations called Carpe Diem too. And I'm just doing what I can. It's just like little by little, day by day, piece by piece, whichever way.
Yeah. I think another thing I would encourage you to do too, if you're not finding the kind of grant that you're looking for, earlier you mentioned that you're involved in more than one discipline, so it's the music as well as like the children's books, right? I don't know if you've
Yeah.
been specifically looking for like musical grants, things like that. Um,
No, I
I
haven't looked
would.
at those at all.
Oh,
Not
okay.
yet.
Well, that's good. Then maybe there's something out there. That's good.
Okay,
That you
that
didn't
is good.
hit a wall immediately. That's amazing. I love that. I would encourage you to also broaden your search to go beyond just like grants for musicians too. Maybe there's some funding for writers specifically. I know that the National Endowment of the Arts has like a literary fellowship program in New York. Their funding got
Oh,
dismantled this year under the current administration. Unfortunately, they
right,
paused all of their grants. But
right.
they've been around for forever. I'm anticipating that they're going to come back at some point. So definitely, I would visit the National Endowment of the Arts website for that literary fellowship. Um, a lot of those databases that I had included in that presentation, which you'll receive, are they're linked to a database where you can really specifically filter what you're looking for.
Okay.
Again, you came with like a pretty specific idea of what you want, which is great. We want to be specific with our goals.
Yeah.
That should hopefully help you in kind of like filtering out those opportunities to find what's best for you.
Okay, thanks. So in these next few days, I'm going to try to like really just nail it out, like put dream big and dream small. So when I do whatever disaster I get to put together, may I email you and ask you to have a look at it?
We can talk about anything. I'm open
Okay.
to anything. I make no promises.
Oh no, I'm not
I have a
asking you to
busy
promise
load.
anything. I'm just telling. I could say, well, could you take a glance at this? And I have other people to ask too. You said at least ask 3 people. So,
That would be
um,
great. Yeah.
so what
Yep. My
is?
email is in the chat as well, so you
Oh
can
yeah,
see it
but
there.
I
Wallace
didn't
Mallory
see
at
that.
Gmail.
So I got your Instagram handle, but I didn't. I didn't see your email.
Anna,
But
you just popped the email in there for you. So
okay, thanks.
yeah,
I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for sharing all that. And I think that the advice and information that Mallory you've given is so helpful and can be applied to like so people can take little nuggets for their own situations. And I hope that everybody has success in building their grants and finding that narrative that's compelling. I know that you all have it there. So um, thank you again. And I just want to say before we hop off, there's going to be a little survey that pops up at the end of this workshop. We would love it if you all would take a second to fill it out. It'll give you the opportunity to give feedback and talk about this session as well as other sessions we've had. And that helps us just improve our programming and gather data for our own grants that we need to receive for Pandion. So thank you so much. And yeah, join us next week for the listening session. If you sign up, you'll get emails next week that will allow you to submit music that we can listen to together and give feedback on. So definitely sign up for that next week. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you, Mallory. Thank you,
Well,
everyone.
see you
Thank
soon.
you. Talk soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.